If anybody has anything to discuss, please add it.
I don't know if this is related to this agenda, but I would like to talk more about the SOAK test job that it's currently trying to run against the PRs. I didn't manage to start the pro job that I configured with the test job name. Do you need to approve it, or how does that work?
Did the PR get merged? You have to merge the PR first.
Okay, no, the PR is still open.
Yeah, it has to get merged into test infra. And then after that, some updates happen to prow's config, and then you can do that. You can.
Okay, got it.
All right, I'll wait one more minute to 9:33. And for those on the call who weren't here earlier, we're having some issues getting into the Zoom account. So that means that I won't be able to start the recording before the meeting. So I'll just edit it when we get access, but it also means a delay to the recording, the upload. But I'll talk about that in a minute too. All right, I'm just gonna start now. So hello, everybody, and welcome to the May 3rd, 2022 iteration of the Kubernetes SIG Windows community meeting. As always, these meetings are recorded and uploaded to YouTube, so be sure to adhere to the CNCF Code of Conduct. Let's get started with announcements. First announcement, or the only announcement that I have, is that the 124 release is still expected to happen today. It looks like the ETA for that release is 5 p.m. PST today. The SIG release team is, I think they gave a bunch of go signals for the release, and they're just making everything happen now. So look out for an announcement to the Kubernetes dev alias for when all those artifacts are available. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to announce? If not, we'll go into the welcome new folks. So yeah, let's give some space if there's anybody who's new who wants to introduce themselves and, you know, ask some questions or say what they're working on. I don't think I see any new faces on the participants list today. But if there is somebody, feel free to, you know, add your name to the meeting notes or say hi. Okay, let's move into the agenda. First agenda item, I was briefly discussing this. There are some issues with the Zoom account. We're having issues getting into the Zoom account. So the meeting is set up to auto record to the cloud. So we have that, but there may be a slight delay between the meetings happening and getting the meetings recordings and uploading them to YouTube. So I'll update once we get that resolved. Next agenda item. I'm not sure who added this. Configuring Windows nodes.
I did. Yeah,
James did.
Yeah. So we're redoing a bunch of the docs, as you may know, for the 124 release. One of the docs that I was working on was the kubeadm docs, if anybody is not familiar with the kubeadm docs, they have a bunch of information about how to install Flannel, how to configure Flannel, and all of those types of things, as well as running kubeadm. The Linux docs used to have that information in them, and they've moved away from it. There's a new third-party policy for docs documentation. And so for 124, we're actually following that same policy and pushing the docs and any Windows-specific information into the standard kubeadm docs. One of the things that came up while we were doing that was the kubeadm docs was kind of the one place where there was a bunch of information on how to install components, where to set services, what kind of folder structure you should have on the Windows node and that type of thing. And that's going to be going away in 124. And we have a little bit of that in one of the other docs, but we were wondering if how much that's used, and also like, do we need to have this type of information somewhere, and where do we store that? Because it can be very specific according to what runtime you're using, as well as what CNI you're using. But was looking for kind of just a little bit of feedback on, if we need this information in the Kubernetes docs, and if where it should live. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts or opinions there.
My gut feeling says that these are being used today, just based on some issues and feedback and pull requests that we occasionally see into the SIG Windows tools repository where these happen. I'm not sure if that's the extent of that, of this, yeah, if that's the extent of that usage, or if there's a lot more people who find the information on the Kubernetes website that don't have, that don't get to the SIG Windows tools repository or not, though.
I would say it's invaluable. Like, I understand the need to remove it, but it is a mess in general if you start going to different projects in different places and seeing the best place to put things. And one thing we deal with is a lot of things expect stuff to be in the default locations like C or CVAR. And a lot of enterprise shops don't put things on C drives. They want to put things on D drives, right? So it's not the host OS. And a lot of things don't work by default that way. So, I mean, guidance around where to place that and how to place it and like how to move things around, like, I think would be valuable. Maybe you can abstract a little bit and not be so prescriptive, but I guess that's the right word to use, but be more of, here's the things you need to consider, and here's where you kind of need to place them. Either use the defaults or subdirectory them, but keep the same structure and stick them over here. But like, like 1 or 2 examples, but not like, this is the way you do it. Because I think that, I don't know, it's a pain. Like, there's things that expect things to be in exact locations, and that's frustrating when they're not, and you have to know how to work around it. So I think having docs would be, even at a high level with that stuff, I think helps. And that's why you see probably people using it a lot, because they just don't know where to put it.
Yeah, I think the not being prescriptive, but giving some guidance is kind of the right direction to go. I'm interested. Do you run your services? So there's a couple different ways to install kubelet and install kuproxy. Are you using NSSM? Or are you using something else? Are you just using straight Windows services? I think that comes down to some of the details, as well as how do you configure these things. So just interested in what you're using out there.
I don't like NSSM, but there is not an alternative to turn things into Windows services easily. It irritates me that not everybody has a -- install service or whatever flag to like make a Windows service from the Go app. Like, I feel like that should be baked in more places. For RKE2, the RKE2 service installs using the Go framework with a flag as a Windows service using Go. And then we supervise kubelet and containerd and all of those things. So all those things get booted up by RKE2, and it supervises that those processes stay running. So we avoid a lot of having to use NSSM and stuff, but we worked around that, but we still create services using Go. And I understand the PowerShell script to then generate the Windows service is what Calico uses, which is with NSSM, but I don't know. I don't think they're a good solution, but it is confusing because everybody's all over the board,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like, I don't think we can, because of these same third-party content guidelines, I don't think it changes docs that say, here's one option to configure the Windows bits to run as services on the Kubernetes website is to use NSSM. I don't think that would be approved on the main Kubernetes website. for the same reasons. So yeah, it's kind of tricky. Which is unfortunate because I feel like there is a lot of, like if you're using systemd on Linux, here are the extra settings you need to use. And it is a little bit, I mean,
Why would they not approve that? I mean, it's such a standard deal at this point.
It's old and unmaintained.
well, it's, yeah, I don't think that it's anything against NSSM. It's that in general, they're against, like there's some policies against
I mean, I think
linking.
if we're going to have any issues maintaining our docs, we should symlink Kubernetes docs.io and say, look, if you want help with Windows, here's the place it's maintained, and either have our own doc site or do it on tools or whatever. Or dev tools for that matter. Any I don't care what repository it is. But we should have a home that we can just push to, that we don't, there's not enough of us to spend time jumping over CNCF hoops. I mean, for Linux, it's different. You've got thousands of engineers trying to update docs every day, but for Windows, there's hardly any of us that can even maintain it, much less have time to go back and forth with the doc process, right?
Yeah, I'm not.
That's
so,
the way I look at it. I know that's probably an unpopular opinion, but I mean, what can we do?
Well, I'm not sure if like, I don't know if those policies would apply to anything in like the SIG window, Kubernetes SIG's repository. So that may be possible to just have a link on the Kubernetes website saying for more information or tips on,
and then we can just literally push to docs at a whim and not have any approval process in place other than just our own people, you know? That's my vote. Jamie, is that crazy talk in your opinion?
The only
Go ahead, Claudio.
the only counter argument I would have would be the fact that the website is versioned. Let's say you're only interested in Kubernetes 1.23. Then you want to read documentation regarding 1.23, not the current master. And things change over time anyways. And that will still mean that we have to for documentations, which might be even a bit trickier on GitHub, maybe.
You were kind of breaking up there, but I think I got the gist of what you were saying. I'm saying that
versioning, I think.
Yeah,
making
Kubernetes
the versioning
website's
point.
versioned and other things aren't, and it's a lot of effort to maintain versions even in these other repositories. I think specifics like flags for components that would be more subject to versioning would still get documented in on the main website. But tips or guides on how to set things up with like NSSM or with a native service, or potentially even a guide on how to implement that Golang service base stuff that Jamie was talking about. We could maybe shy away from specifics and keep it general. I don't think it's a perfect solution, but
I mean, I just feel like it's less work for us to maintain our own stuff. Like, I mean, I think that's what it comes down to. There's a million problems with maintaining your own stuff, but it's net less work and a higher quality product that we put out.
It also reduced the confusion of, oh, I read this thing on K8s, but if I go to the SIG Windows repo, it's telling me something completely different. Which one's true? Is the official docs the truth, or is SIG Windows the truth? And the reality is SIG Windows was updated, the docs were not.
Yeah.
And if,
Yes.
and if
So
you kind of
exactly. So let's
consolidated all that, yeah, it would ease a lot of, here's high level stuff like flags and things that get auto generated, right? And then, don't use flags, use config files, like, do this, do that, put them here, like.
I mean, me and James had this book that got rejected. Like, maybe James, I mean, maybe we should just open source that damn thing, right? And put that on there too, right? Like they did with the CAPI stuff, right? They have a cluster API book and people can read it and the CAPI group maintains it.
Well, the vSphere cloud provider does the same thing. All their docs are in a doc book type format.
Yeah.
That's a website. And that's what they use to point everybody to.
I think it's encouraged of all of the cluster API providers do that too.
So I think what I'm hearing is that this is valuable. We can put some basic, maybe a basic page that just talks about like this is how you install kubelet as a service using the flags. And then from there, you know, link out to more details, like here's a walkthrough on SIG Windows that has more details and things like that. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think so. That would be.
Does
anybody have a strong objection to doing that?
I don't. I was just going to add is SIG Windows tools that place? Do we think?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's as intuitive as anywhere else to go
Yeah.
find it.
We can always move it again if we want. It's just a pointer, right? Like,
Yeah, true.
you can move pointers around all day, you know, as long as you have ability to edit the code base.
And it would be cool, since most of us deal with Microsoft documentation, to write it in a similar style voice, because that reduces confusion. You know, because
Cool.
Yeah.
well, I mean, Microsoft has a very specific way of writing docs, and you spend all your time reading PowerShell docs and reading Windows docs to figure out something that, if the Kubernetes docs were in a very similar like format and style, this is just my personal opinion, I think that would ease people finding the information that they need. It might confuse.
Yeah, a
people
little
coming
Windows
from-
branding on there.
Yeah,
So-
and the docs, the Kubernetes website has their own style, and
Yes, it's
Yeah.
not like anything else from the way I see it. So
Cool.
as we
Also, if there's any volunteers that are very passionate about this topic, always looking for extra help. Beyond that, I think we can move on to the next topic.
Yeah. Does anybody want to own this problem?
I can maybe help out with this. I will say too that the big doc updates that we wanted to do should be hopefully landing pretty soon. So we can just maybe use that as an opportunity to see if there's any feedback and then figure out what to add to this other split out docs.
I'm going to poke David. He might be able to own this whole thing. Because he's been getting involved in the docs thing. Would you suggest, Mark, that this should be like what do y'all think? Like, this would be a sort of an announcement that we're moving the docs here, add the new docs, and then create a pointer in the old docs that points to the new docs, so that people going to kubernetes.io can see and then maintain those docs.
I think we should. I think if we're serious about doing this, I think we should maybe have an issue in SIG Windows tools proposing, like, we put some specific docs in here with a discussion about what the outline is and maybe some other higher level details. And then if enough people, like, if there's consensus on that, we can just start adding some of, like, we can have like either a skeleton of that structure, and then after that's done, we can update it. We can figure out where to update it on the website to point to that.
Okay. I think I know somebody that can own this whole problem. So for you, and then maybe we just can sync up with them for like 30 minutes sometime, you know, and just make the plan, and then they'll just own it from beginning to end, because they're really trying to dig into the doc stuff, and they're on the release team here at VMware, and they're new to Kubernetes, and he's, you know, and he even uses Windows. So
Can you encourage them to file an issue in SIG Windows tools proposing just this. It doesn't need to have a lot of details yet, but
Yeah. Let me write this down and just, yeah. Okay. I'm going to work on getting this started. If anybody else wants to own it that's here, just speak now. Otherwise, I'm just going to, David's going to probably own it end to end.
yeah, and I'll
3.
help out, but I'm happy to have some other people own it
Okay.
too, especially if they are looking for a good place to get started with Windows. and
Yeah,
Kubernetes.
like if you want to mentor him or whatever, that's great. Like, you know, that's probably necessary because you can at least get us started. And okay, cool. I'm gonna assume nobody else wants to do this, so I'll
Would you assume
connect
that,
folks
Jay?
and. Okay.
Okay,
I'll-
cool. Yeah,
I'll-
so we'll
I'll-
just wait
I'll
for
take
that issue and then people can comment.
Okay.
And I guess eventually we can do a quick review of it at one of these meetings. Like
On SIG Windows, you want to open the thing on docs.kh.io or whatever?
on
the
SIG
issue?
Windows tools for now.
On SIG Windows tools to replicate the docs. Okay.
Not replicate the docs, but to add some more like specific use cases that may include third-party tool support. Or
Okay, so we're still going to have the old docs.
yeah, we're still going to have a lot of the old docs, but I think maybe some specific tutorials might be a good thing, or like tutorial section can be added in SIG Windows docs. And those probably are going to be very opinionated about what tools you're using and how they're configured. And it can be more clear
Okay.
too and say, this is an example walkthrough where we're going to go pretty deep into setting this up and explain what the settings mean.
Okay, cool.
There, I do think that a lot of, especially general purpose docs, it's valuable to have them on the main website, and I don't want to undermine that.
Mhm.
But those are
Okay.
going to be focused more on Kubernetes specific topics, not necessarily the tools that are used to configure the cluster or the nodes.
Okay, let's sketch out the split there. I was thinking of it differently. I was thinking we just say move them over. I need to know what this, for me to convey that to him is tricky because I don't really even understand what the boundary would be. So
All right, so what should I create an issue with some of that thoughts then, and then
I think you need to create the issue with some boundaries in it.
okay,
And I'm happy to do whatever and help do whatever. And then I think the thing that David could really do is once those boundaries are set, he can work with me or a meme or whoever else to figure out how do I do flannel? What's NSSM? How do I set up DevTools? How do I install Calico? Like those kind of things. And we can show him the specific workflow for those things. And then he can document all that stuff over time and own all those recipes.
okay, I'll try and
Cool.
I'll try and create an issue after the meeting with some boundaries.
Okay.
and then we
Yeah.
can-
Just ping me in the Slack or whatever. And I'll, once you do that, I'll take the baton from there.
Sounds good.
Okay, cool.
All right, I mean, I think this was you that added this host process topic.
Yeah, so I think they are kind of interrelated because from what I understand, the SIG Windows tools has a folder of host process. And this is an example of the CNIs just went there somehow, but that was not the goal, the final goal. So I think after talking with James, like it's better for each CNI handle its own setup on Windows. And that's my question. Like we have a standard to do that. Like, is the code sample enough to start doing these things? Should we move to own repository?
I have some opinions on this. James, do you want to give your opinions? And then
You can go first.
okay, so I think what I've heard and what I agree with is I think that I think the goal should be to not have to host any deployment files in SIG Windows tools repository. I think that in a perfect world, each project that that hosts deployment files for Linux would also host deployment files for Windows in whatever capacity they're comfortable with, whether it's like multi-arch images or a separate guide or whatever. But I don't, in reality, like and I don't know if people have been here, and like, I think the SIG Windows tools is kind of a mess right now and has been, especially, and the requirements for how to get all of this working on container D added some complexity to that. I think that host process containers are currently still in beta, so I can understand that other projects like Calico, Flannel, Antrim may not want to publish deployment guides that require the use of a beta feature, especially one that has security implications like host process containers. So I think the reason why they got all stood up there was it already existed because we had some of the deployment files for the really hacky kubeadm with Docker shim deployments. And because especially when host process containers were in alpha, we needed a place to exercise all of these, to build and exercise all of these and get feedback from this too. So those are my opinions. Like, I think that while host process containers are still in beta, if it makes sense, we can add more examples to the host process folder, but we should be clear saying like these are temporary and we don't want to add a whole bunch, and also try and see if for new projects like the Entrea deployments, if that project is okay just hosting them. I think I would prefer that. And we do want to also try and move the kube proxy images out of, or get rid of those, and just have the kube proxy images that the Kubernetes project is maintaining just support Windows. And I think
I really liked the a meme did that experiments directory in SIG Windows Dev Tools for Image Builder. I thought that was cool, and we have so much Antrea stuff in there. A meme, right? Like maybe making that the home for host process. Yeah.
I guess James, do you want to add your comments? See if it's similar.
Yeah.
Different.
At least for the Calico, I initially tried to push that upstream, but it was kind of challenging because of the way host process is implemented, and Mark did that demo next week. And so now that once that lands, I think Calico's gonna take those changes, and then we can remove it from this tool. So I think I would like to see an effort to go directly to the Antrea project and see that if they're saying, no way, we're not going to take this right now because of XYZ, then we can probably take it into SIG Windows tools. But I would like to see that effort happen before we take it into SIG Windows tools, if that makes sense.
I can talk with Antrea folks to get an answer on that.
Yeah.
James, can you clarify? Is it mainly the lack of being able to use the in-cluster config?
Yeah.
Okay. So hopefully once that's solved, then the deployments for these are going to be a lot simpler, and then it may be a lot easier to get these support for each of these added upstream. Is that?
Yes. Yeah. That's the idea. Yep. And then there's one other tool in there that hooks up container D and ETW logging. You can use it to log any ETW to standard out, which is helpful for all sorts of situations. And I think that's kind of like there's nowhere for that to live, and that seems like a really useful place to live in SIG Windows tools, because it's a tool that somebody could potentially use that doesn't necessarily have a place to live. I guess that's kind of the boundary that I have in my head. And I wish I didn't have to commit the Calico stuff there first. But it was.
I mean,
one of those things.
The Antrea community and the Calico community are both very similar in that they're pretty conservative about what they document. Like I would say.
So we have the answer already.
One other wrinkle that I'll throw into this mix is, so long time ago, all of the images that were built, the container images that were built in SIG Windows tools, were published to a SIG Windows tools Docker Hub account. As everybody knows, they're working on moving away from Docker Hub based container registries. When we initially did the setup to produce some of these images and push them, we went to the GitHub container registry under the Kubernetes SIGs org. And so there's a couple of repositories there that were made public. Since then, the GitHub management team and the Contribex people have locked it down, so we can't make any more container repositories public. I've asked for that to I've asked for more details on that and to make some new images public in that repository. And I didn't really hear anything back. I need to go poke some people with that too. So hosting the container images is another open question. At least what the best place to do that is. I personally would like to stop pushing to the SIG Windows Tools Docker Hub account. And so we're still.
Sounds like SIG Windows Tools just doesn't, we don't really know what it is. It's a place to put CNI docs that the CNI providers don't want, and a place to put PowerShell scripts that we don't.
Yes.
I'm going to go back to, I think that the best place for the Antria host process stuff is in the experiments directory of SIG Windows Dev Tools, because that is a place where you can go and you can test Antria by clicking one button. And we can write up exactly how to run it with a host process configuration, and we can point people to the README. And unless this is going to live in the official Antria repo, I don't see the point of putting it anywhere else, unless somebody says, oh, we would love to have this in tools.
Not a bad idea.
The only reason that makes sense for it to be in tools is if everybody said, oh my God, we need a recipe for Antria in tools. That's the perfect place for it.
Yeah, I would like to see it this in
we already have a dumping ground for weird, stupid recipes. It's called SIG Windows Dev Tools.
Yeah. Maybe we could see how the discussion about the issue that I'm going to create in SIG Windows Tools goes to. I need to drop for the SIG node meeting too. So.
Cool.
Bye all.
Bye everybody.